Welcome to Hip Hop Movie Club, the show that harmonizes the rhythm of hip hop with the magic of movies. Today, we're discussing the 2002 documentary, The Freshest Kids, the history of the B-Boy. We are three old heads who put their old heads together to vibe on these films for you. I'm Dino Wright, podcaster, filmmaker, longtime hip hop fan, and I must give a shout out to my brother, J Prime, a real and true B-Boy.
Yeah, J Prime.
Yes, sir.
I'm JB, 80s and 90s nostalgia junkie, longtime hip hop fan. And man, I was such a fan of the sitcom What's Happening, featuring Fred Rerun Barry, who was featured in this documentary.
Nice. I'm Boogie, a DJ, longtime hip hop fan, and I wish that we were never convinced in my neighborhood that b-boying was played out. And they actually talk a little bit about this in the documentary, but one of my favorite pastimes to this day is sitting around and watching b-boy battles.
In this episode, we'll answer the question, how important is breakin to hip-hop culture? And please hit that subscribe button down below so you won't miss an episode.
Freshest Kids explores the history and evolution of b-boying, also known as breakin, from its roots in the Bronx to its international explosion. Archival footage of key figures in the b-boy scene and many hip-hop luminaries dot this fascinating journey about the enormous impact of breakin on society.
And here are 5 things you need to know about the Freshest Kids. Number 1, a Bronx tale. Born at DJ Kool Herc's house parties in the early 70s, this wasn't about manufactured culture. It was straight from the streets. Block parties, cardboard floors, pure creativity. Number 2, Hollywood used and lost. From the South Bronx in the 70s to media-crazed 1980s, when they were featured in movies from Wild Style to Flashdance, but when the cameras left, the real culture returned underground. Number 3, the system fought back. The Freshest Kids touches on conflicts, arrests, and unrest between b-boys and authorities, especially before breakin turned mainstream and international. Number 4, a cast of thousands. You might lose count of the many, many hip-hop legends, both dancers and rappers, seen in this film. And number 5, dance was never just dance. It was always about expression over entertainment and resistance over recognition. Breakin gave kids power when everything else tried to take it away. It was instrumental in propelling hip-hop to international heights.
Right on. So Freshest Kids, this is an amazing documentary. One of those ones where we look back and we're like, how have I not seen this yet? If you really want the whole lineage of breakin and b-boying, this is where you should begin, honestly. So first takeaway, we talk about the Bronx. So much of the hip-hop journey, as we've discussed many times, starts there in the South Bronx. DJ Kool Herc with his house parties, breaking over those break beats, etc. And you see the 5 elements emerge from the culture.
4 elements.
Four elements, but they also talk about the 5th one, like storytelling as well. So, but yeah, one of the quotes that stuck with me was Mos Def or Yasin Bey saying that this culture had always been challenged, and they had the notion of being like lower class and not as intellectual or impactful, yet they go and create the subculture that evolves into a multi-billion-dollar industry. And that's a theme we talk about quite a bit. And I just love that aspect of it. We were just chatting before. DJ Kool Herc, the iconic address is 1520 Sedgwick Ave. And we realized KRS-One, who's featured quite a bit in this documentary, grew up on 1600 Sedgwick. And it was like legends, right, next to each other. And from the Bronx emerges what was pretty much regionalized, goes international. Yep. And Boogie, what do you take away from that early aspect of breakin, how it in the 70s and how it takes off from the Bronx?
Yeah, so I really appreciate this documentary because it gave us the inside perspective, like you see on DJ Kool Herc in his own words describing how it all started. And he said, he started doing these parties in the rec room in the building, and he noticed that whenever he was playing music, the crowd would start waiting for that break when all of the instruments in the song would stop, and you would just hear the beat going. He said, and then they would all just start dancing to that part. So he said, after noticing that, he said, all right, you know what? I'm going to buy a couple of records. So he would buy duplicates. And he said, I'm going to start looping that break by playing that part of the song over and over. And he actually gave it a name, he called it the merry-go-round. And he said, once he started doing that, he would just keep that break going and going and going. And it would, give the crowd a chance to keep dancing. He said, now, different crews would be at these parties or whatever. And then the dancers would start creating their own signature moves to these breaks. He said, okay. So that it was, dancing on that break, which became known as the B-boy. And I was like, wow, that's a really cool breakdown. Cause I remember, well, not as far as I remember, it was there already. I wasn't, there at the beginning. So it was just something that I saw and was like, oh, this is pretty cool. But it was kind of good to hear how he actually got the records and had the break, and how the crowd actually started responding to that break. And it was real good. It was real cool. Just hearing the different perspectives of some of the respective crews that were around at the time, different influential breakers / B-boys. Like I always knew Crazy Legs. Crazy Legs has always been one of my favorite B-boys from the Rocksteady crew. But to hear about him talking about the guy that influenced him, B-boy named Spy, I was like, I'd never heard of Spy before. So that was pretty cool. So I was like, all right, and like to this day, even though he's not necessarily performing, Crazy Legs is still an influential person in the hip hop community. He's always at events. He's always pushing the culture forward. He's got merch. He's at different events. He's speaking engagements. He's always offering that political commentary that was at the root of hip hop. So to hear, him talking about somebody that influenced him was pretty cool.
And he co-produced this film.
Yeah, I caught that. It's like, wow.
The other aspect, like you said, Spy was legendary. I had never heard of him. I learned about so many of these other B-boys that deserve so much more praise because they were pioneers that don't really get their due. Again, Crazy Legs is one that most of us have heard of if you're in tune with the history of breakdancing. But Ken Swift, Frosty Freeze, Mr. Freeze, Spy, Batch, all these guys had their own styles, and they influenced so many people throughout the lineage. And then as it becomes mainstream, people are emulating these guys. They laid the foundation.
Yeah. There's another aspect that I did appreciate as well, the Latin recognition. And that's one thing that I see it all the time on social media. There's always a debate, from those who know, from the Latin community saying, we were there in the beginning. And then those who don't know, telling them that they weren't, invalidating them in the culture. And this documentary actually does a good job of putting Latin Americans out in the front as well, because they were there. We're all in the same community growing up. Even, there were white B-boys as well. And they featured in the document. You see them spinning and doing the same moves and performing just like everyone else. It's like, it was basically rooted in the culture and for people who were oppressed, who were poor, underprivileged, no matter what color you were. If you lived in a neighborhood, you participated in the culture and you helped nurture it and start it up.
And I like it. And I guess your brother J Prime would have this sense too. It's kind of like a code of conduct among B-boys, it seems. Like if you could just go all out but not lose your cool because it gets intense, it's like, Dan, you're a real B-boy. Like you can hang. If you become unhinged, then it's like, man, this is not for you. There's this kind of like code of conduct, which I thought was neat that they hit on as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that stems from that transition from the gangs into actual crews, and that peace treaty that we seen in the earlier documentary that we watched not too long ago. It's like, it was all about keeping the peace and just performing, doing the best you can, and then walking away.
It's like a fraternity or brotherhood of mutual respect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jay organizes a lot of B-boy battles and like 2 versus 2 type battles. And boy, if you didn't know, you think that they're about to cut the blows. But no, this is just how it is. It's just very intense. Goes right to the line, and then they dap each other up afterwards.
Right. Yeah, Jay Prime's come out with us on a few occasions. He also came out to Princeton with us. So part of the collective, for sure.
That's
absolutely.
Right. Yep.
Backtracking a little bit. I've also been a fan of the New York City Breakers, but I remember them as the New York City Breakers. And this kind of touched on how they actually got their beginning, which I found pretty interesting. They were actually the Floor Masters. I was like, oh, okay. Because I kept seeing Floor Masters. I'm like, I never heard of the Floor Masters. I'm like, they became the New York City Breakers. They gave them a nice polished up name and put them out in the limelight.
Floor Master sounds like a carpet company to me. So I think
really.
Right.
They need to clean my linoleum, please.
Yes.
One of those things we get in the Valpak coupons, and it's like
exactly. Yes, Valpak coupon. Yes.
Come through with the boom.
Oh man.
It's like the what?
It's probably a better name in
Yeah.
New York City Breakers than Floor Masters.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh, that's awesome. But yeah,
Did y'all see the clip of? Did you see the clip of Grand Mixer DXT breakdance?
yes.
I was like, oh shoot, he got footwork.
Multi-talented.
Like you said
But then
last episode, it always comes back to folks that we had encountered. We met Grand Mixer DXT and Grandmaster Kaz was in this as well.
yeah, the few of them,
Crush
the Crush brothers were in it. Yeah,
a couple of other Crush brothers also. Yep. Yeah. We move on to the next. So at South Bronx is the origin story, and then it picks up a lot of steam in the late 70s, maybe like 77, 78, and then the media praise. It hit a snag though in terms of disco's popularity, right?
mm-hmm.
And I like the comment where these guys were like, they're going all out and they're sweating. It's like, well, how are you going to pick up the ladies when you're just like all breaking and disjointed, battling each other, and then you get these suave, leisure suits or whatever, the afros and the bell bottoms and the disco where you can actually, get close to the ladies, and then it's like, all right, nobody wants to see us breakdancing anymore, and that kind of really erased some of the momentum that they had.
Mm-hmm.
But then Hollywood picked up on it, right? Breakin was kind of went underground, but movies like Wild Style and Flashdance and helped bring it to the mainstream.
Yeah, I think like it was like little sparks here and there, and a couple club promoters would have some of the guys performing in the clubs, and that would just kept it it was like simmering. It just kept it simmering, long enough for Hollywood to pick up on it, the mainstream media to really pick up on it. But when they started having public battles like that battle at Lincoln Center and the battles that they had at the Grill nightclub, yeah, that kind of kept it simmering long enough for Hollywood to pick up on it. But a lot of guys I saw we mentioned in that even with the West Coast guys, once they saw that Flashdance clip, they were like, oh, and that's when they all started kind of trying to pick it up on it. But the West Coast had their own flavor going on over there. That was cool that they actually gave a shout out to the West and showed the difference between West Coast b-boying and East Coast b-boying. Mm-hmm. I mean, granted now, with social media and everything being so accessible, there's like a big merger between the two. So you see guys on the East Coast popping and locking. You see guys on the West Coast doing the footwork and, aerial moves that the East was known for. Now they're actually, and even internationally, it's crazy. But yeah, man, Hollywood picked up on it and ran with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, breaking to the Wrath of Khan. I couldn't resist.
That's what it is.
Yeah, Electric Boogaloo for the fans who aren't familiar. We bust on Breaking 2 and we give it different sequel names. Sometimes the Secret of the Ooze or the Wrath of Khan.
Yeah, I didn't realize how impactful that scene in Flashdance was. Featured New York City Breakers and Crazy Legs and Ken Swift and I think it was Frosty Freeze, a few others.
Mm-hmm.
And they showed when the premiere came out, and the fans, whoever was in that preview audience, they went nuts over that scene. And I thought the funny part was Jennifer Beals really didn't want to do any. She didn't want no part of these guys, like when they were doing some press photos or anything like that. And then after she sees the reaction, she's like, "Oh yeah, let's have some photos. Let's take some photos."
Yeah, that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. She used to diss us. Now she wants to kiss us.
It was sad in more ways than one.
I saw her pop up a few years ago in the Mandalorian series on Disney Plus.
Yes.
Yeah. I was like, that's Jennifer Beals.
Yeah, she looked great.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, she aged well.
But it's a good point you make about Flashdance being as influential as it was. Even I didn't realize that. And I looked it up. So I mapped this out. Flashdance comes out in April of 83. Wild Style is not until November of 83. And then Beat Street wasn't out until the next year. So in the timeline, it actually is pretty early.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, and it's crazy because I remember watching it, and I've seen that scene so many times, and like just on social media clips, and even the numerous times I've watched Flashdance. I really like Flashdance. I love Jennifer Beals, and I watch that movie all the time just because of her. That scene, I've seen that scene so many times, and I think it was maybe like I was telling you guys before we started recording. It was either like the end of last year or the beginning or early this year. I was watching it, and all of a sudden a light bulb went off, and I recognized. I'm like, "Oh my god, that's them! That's them!" All these years, I never realized it was them until like fairly recently. Pop spinning documentary.
So another turning point for the mass popularity of breaking was the 1984 Summer Olympics. So that ties in, following the timeline you just mentioned, Donna, right? The world sees breaking on one of the stages, international stage. And I see that Ronald Reagan, the president at the time, was enjoying seeing these dancers and kind of laughing. And when you see the leader of the U.S. at that point, and you're like, there's something to this that has that staying power. But just go back. I love that what you said about boogie, the West Coast, popping, strutting, locking. I have to quote Fred Berry rerun, the late great Fred Berry. He said, "Poppin' was like locking plus the robot." And he kind of like broke it down into like a formula. I'm like, oh my god,
that was one of the best parts of this documentary.
That was great. That was great because you don't realize
there's a lot of nuance.
Yeah, a lot of nuance to that.
Yeah,
that was great.
And I had a mind blowing moment. The Radiotron was an actual club. Mm-hmm. The Radiotron was featuring in Breakin' 2, and it was a real club. I did not know that.
Yeah.
I thought it was just for the movie.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah,
for me, that's not in this film, but when I became really aware of breakdancing was the 1984 Grammys. And this is the performance of Herbie Hancock Rocket. And so the androids are the breakdancers. And I was, 9 years old? I was like, whoa, what is that? What are they doing? So, yeah, quite formative. At that time in your life, you see something like that, blows your mind.
I still bring up the Herbie Hancock video once in a while on YouTube with those legs going back and forth. I remember showing my son that as a kid, and it just blows your mind. That was so far ahead of its time.
Yeah.
It was just so creative.
That song, that video and that song was just like crazy.
Yeah, for sure. But as we said, you said simmering, and there's fits and starts with breaking, and the government ends up coming down. This is one of our takeaways about the system fighting back. Breaking got a little bit powerful in terms of large gatherings. And then as the U.S. government's prone to do, things get a little bit loud, and they started actively shutting down spaces where hip-hop elements and breaking lived, which is thematic of a lot of the things we see today as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Currently.
Yeah. So there's conflicts, arrests, etc. And you see scenes with folks in riot gear in LA, so look what's going on today, protests, and even back then, it's a form of expression here, and the authorities didn't want to see that, so they started shutting it down, and that really put a damper on the momentum again. As hip hop culture is known to do, it survives and thrives and takes on new forms and elements, and it kind of just goes underground with the breaking. Then you have these other elements picking up the slack. So there was those scenes there where you have the cops, arresting folks and everything, but then you have the break dancers getting out there doing their thing.
Despite the government crackdowns.
Exactly.
The cops are standing standing at attention in riot gear, and the guys are just
popping along,
egging them on.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like instead of a sit-in, it's like a spin-in.
There you go. Yeah, spinning. Absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
Absolutely.
Another great element of this, and this is one of our other takeaways, it's like a cast of thousands. There were so many hip-hop legends, both dancers and rappers, in this film. I was saying before we started here, some of my most favorite people were in this film, this documentary. Q-Tip, Fife, we love Trap Called Quest. Rakim was in this, but as I mentioned, Fred Berry rerun, KRS-One, Yassine Bey.
Yeah.
I'm missing a few, but
MC Search, Redman.
yeah. MC
There's
Search,
just so
Redman.
many. You can't keep
So
track
many.
of it.
Yeah.
So many.
Fab Five Freddy.
Yeah. Exactly.
Fat Five Freddy was in the
And then the actual B-boy crews. Like,
Yeah.
there was so many of them. I was trying to keep up with them. They were just popping up. I'm like, oh my God. Like, Rocksteady Crew, Zulu Kings, South Soul Crew, Crazy Commanders, New York City Breakers, Bronx Boys. And that's just the few that I could pick up on. There was and then there were others from the West Coast that they were popping up too quick. I couldn't even keep up. Oh, Electric Boogaloo, Pony Express, Shake City Rockers, Air Force Crew. Those are some of the West Coast crews that they mentioned. This is chock full of authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
I think it gives a lot more credibility to have those hip hop legends in it.
Yeah.
From both coasts. Yeah. And as we hit upon, the dance wasn't just for the sake of dance. It's a form of expression, entertainment, resistance, giving these kids that creative outlet and power when there's a lot of oppression going on. And that spirit helped propel hip hop to international heights. So that's the underdog story that hip hop is, and breakin is a huge piece of that. Sure.
Yeah. There were a couple of quotes that I caught in the beginning. I didn't see who said it, but it said one was B-boying is the ultimate body manifestation of hip hop. And I was like, yeah. And then there was another one that said it's not a trend, it's a legitimate art form, which we see now because, just last year they put it into the Olympics. Granted, it's not in the upcoming one, but who knows? It might pop back up again in a revamped format.
Don't say ray gun. I had to go.
You said the name you weren't supposed to say.
I'm just
she who shall not be named.
Man.
Oh my God! An abomination.
Put a stain on breakin.
But then mentioning that, the one thing that I would have liked to have seen more was the B-girl part of breakin. There wasn't a lot of it in there. There was some, but not a lot. And there's probably a whole documentary's worth of stuff just on that.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
It'd be cool to do a part 2 of this. What's QD3 do up to these days?
The competition aspect is tremendous. The battling and parallel with the rap battles we've seen, and then films like 8 Mile and Bodied, and when we saw You Got Served, and that type of competition is. We're a society that loves competition. That's why we love sports so much. To have that crew, a rallying cry, and that's what probably fuels J Prime and his crew is who's going to win this thing. We're in this together, and they got that sense of pride. It's it's great to see.
Yeah. It's funny. I was just looking at my notes, and there was one quote that I got. One part that the Crazy Legs was talking. He said in the beginning when they first were going out and they were traveling to battle crews, he compared it to martial arts films. He's like, I heard your style was good. And I started cracking up because I'm like, oh my God.
I love that. Yeah. But
that was such a good one.
Yeah, it's a great one. But I'm glad you brought that up because speaking of Kung Fu, it talks about the Kung Fu influence on breakin. And we talk, Dinah Wright was just at the Wu-Tang concert. We talked on the documentary of Mikes and Men, how they're a huge influence from Kung Fu and Shaolin.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also the gymnastics element as well. Some of these guys, with the way they're moving their arms and flipping around, like that's what you see on like a pommel horse or some floor routines. And they're so muscular and so talented. Like you said, physical manifestation of hip hop and martial arts. And the quote was great too. I almost wanted to be where the subtitles don't match up. Your style is good.
Yeah. It was a good acknowledgement that hip hop didn't come from nowhere. It did come from gymnastics and kung fu movies and capoeira and Lindy Hops, and they have great footage of Sammy Davis just going crazy on the floor. I'm like, whoa. That's how it was.
Yep.
For real, this Sammy Davis for real was an OG B-boy if you think about it, and you see him breaking in some of those earlier guys.
And the Nicholas brothers, too.
Mhm.
The Nicholas brothers are phenomenal dancers. It's like, wow.
Yeah, so there's a whole lineage still. I mean, we'll get into rating, but this is a must-see if you are into breakin and b-boy culture and how did it get from its origins to now. And like I said, we say it originated in the Bronx, but as you see, actors, there's roots way before that, but when it become more of a cultural phenomenon,
Yeah.
that's where you see it there in the Bronx for sure.
This was the must-see. Yeah. The archival footage was phenomenal, and just the commentary, and it was so cohesive. You can clearly follow it along as it was explaining how everything tied together.
I know it probably made you want to get up and relive your
What?
breaking days, Boogie.
Man, I remember I used to have the box in front of the house. Anytime my parents bought a major appliance or some furniture, that box was in front of the house with the radio.
Yes.
I mean, and I never really took off with it, but I tried. Gangster rap came through and shut it down.
Yeah.
So nobody in the hood, everybody stopped dancing. It's like, oh man. And I remember I got older and I was like, wait a minute. It never went away. Why did they tell us that it was corny? And then, meanwhile, they were doing it all over the world. I had no idea. And then all of a sudden, my eyes opened up and I started seeing all these clips.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh man, I never should have stopped.
Yeah, when it's Red Bull BC1 season, like the social media feed blows up. It's great.
Oh my God, yes. And then all of the movies that popped out, like even the cheesiest ones have great dancers in them. Like the acting is horrible, but they can dance like nothing.
Yep.
It's like, oh man,
Mm-hmm.
who knows? I could have popped up in one of those movies or something.
I think most of Gen X has tried it in some form or fashion, not as bold. Even if it's just in your home or in the shower or bathroom, you're trying to do, even some basic pop and lock or get on the floor and try to do a basic spin. I have one pair of black parachute pants with crazy amount of zippers. And it was I just felt good in it, like slick. I felt like I could do a couple things, but I was never bold enough to embarrass myself like that. I don't have much rhythm, so at least I admit it and know my limitations. But it was fun. It was just so much fun.
That's funny. They kind of brought me back to that little Pauly Shore anecdote. He was talking about all of the Samoans were at his house. All of the Samoans were at his house trying to teach him how to break. His mom's like, "What is everybody doing over here? Mom, they're teaching me how to break dance."
Yeah, the Pauly Shore stuff was funny. He had some ridiculous raunchy quotes as well.
Oh, man. Yeah, he did.
Yeah, you got to go watch and see that.
Yeah.
Boogie, did you have the Alfonso Ribeiro breakdance thing?
No.
The VHS tape that he
sold? VHS tape.
Oh my God.
I remember it though. I totally remember it. I didn't. I was like,
there needs to be a whole documentary about that.
Oh my God, yes.
I need the oral history of that particular VHS tape.
Seriously. He went from the tap dance kid to doing b-boy breaking videos.
Yeah.
To Dancing with the Stars.
Dancing with the Stars. To the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. To the Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah, I was like, how the heck did he get on Dancing with the Stars? He could actually dance already.
He's no joke, man. He got the moves. Carlton doesn't just have the Tom Jones moves. He's got
right. Seriously.
Moves.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Legendary.
You know what's funny that you think about that, the VHS, I'm thinking to the movie Napoleon Dynamite. I don't know if you guys have seen that. When he goes to that discount store, he gets dance moves by Darren or something like that. Yeah. He studies the moves and all the talent show, and he's doing like these crazy, it's kind of like it's a form of break dancing, but then he goes a little crazy, but he steals the show.
He puts his own spin on it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, all right.
Spin on it.
Go Napoleon.
That reminds me of those viral clips of the lady. This is hip hop.
Yes, those are so great.
Not hip hop. This is hip hop. You got to relax with it. Relax. It's slouch. Relax. It's slouch.
And she updated them too. She redid them. They're so good.
Those pop up in the feeds from time to time, and you just got
that's always a good time when they come back.
Absolutely. Man.
Spandex suit or whatever. Yeah.
Break-ins everywhere.
Yeah.
You don't
It's
even realize it anymore.
Yeah, for sure. Nice. How you guys want to go around and rate the Freshest Kids?
Let's do
Let's
it.
do this. So, Boogie, I think we know the answer, but for Freshest Kids, bring that funky flick back.
Bring that funky flick back.
Or leave it in the vault.
Bring that funky flick back. Again and again.
Dino, Freshest Kids, bring that funky flick back or leave it in the vault.
I am bringing this funky flick back. This is one of the best and most comprehensive films about b-boying.
Yeah, I'm aligned. Bring that funky flick back and keep it front and center. This, I think, needs more airplay, actually. It's not more.
I just love the 90s style of it. It was definitely made in an era.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, this would have been perfect on ESPN2 when they first had ESPN2.
Yeah.
Right. Seriously.
It looked the same. The typefaces are the same. All the graphics are like that era. It's delicious. So good.
Like ESPN and one mixtape era.
Definitely has that vibe.
Nostalgic.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you want some nostalgia and a history lesson, this is your cup of tea.
Yeah, we could put this in a Hip Hop 101 course.
Yeah, really.
Required viewing.
Mm-hmm. But really, like this is in the top echelon of b-boy films. Yeah, this has.
Yeah.
All right. Hip Hop Movie Club is produced by your HHNCs, JB, Boogie, and Dino Wright. Theme music by Boogie. As always, check out our full live event schedule on our website, hiphopmovieclub.com. Thanks for watching the Hip Hop Movie Club show. Ring the bell so you get notified when we post new content. It's the sound of a power-up for us, so thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, we have more where that came from. Hit that thumbnail that's about to come on the screen.
And remember, don't hate, circulate.
Yeah.
Circulate like the knowledge.
Circulate
Take those
knowledge.
aerial moves.
There you go.